Right, it is a Monday, which means we bring you our weekly feature, Political View, and the week kicked off with politicians laying tit-for-tat charges. Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan opening a criminal case at the Brooklyn Police Station in Pretoria today against EFF leader Julius Malema and his deputy Floyd Shivambu, accusing them of crimen, injuria, defamation, incitement to violence. Even the EFF protested, you'll remember, for days outside the Zondo Commission while Gordhan was testifying inside. Speaking to a crowd of supporters, Malema called him a dog of white monopoly capital, saying we must hit the dog until the owner comes out. Well, just hours later today, the EFF released a statement saying it will open corruption and other charges against Gordhan himself at that very same police station tomorrow. To discuss this and other political developments, we're joined by analyst from the University of the Northwest, Theo Venter. He joins us from our studio in Pretoria. Theo, thank you. Was this a good move by Pravin Gordhan to go and lay the charges and do it publicly?
Yes, I think so, very definitely, because the whole week the EFF was actually challenging convention, saying things that one shouldn't say publicly, and I think they did so unprotected. In other words, they're not in Parliament where you have a certain cover for what you're saying. This is public, and I think the charges laid by Pravin Gordhan is absolutely his civil rights and his human rights to support that. And I think that comes also in line with the EFF's attack on the media, which is a much broader issue. But I think in a sense, it wasn't a good week for the EFF.
Well, will the cops firstly investigate this? How far do you think it'll go? Remember, there was a case open in terms of Athol Trollop, in terms of the statement that was made there, the cutting of the throat. I can't remember the exact terminology, but was that investigated? It didn't seem to go anywhere.
No, it didn't go anywhere then. But I think we're in a different kind of mindset at the moment. Remember, Ramaphosa has been in charge for the last almost a year, just less than a year. A new Minister of Police. We're waiting for a new NPA director being appointed. There's a lot of things happening that may just provide impetus for these things to be investigated much further and with more resolve. And what the EFF did by laying counter charges, like you said in your introduction, is a kind of a tit for tat. I think the EFF is on a road to nowhere, because these charges has been investigated twice against Mr. Pravin Gordhan, and every time nothing happened because there is nothing.
He did say today, Pravin Gordhan, that he hopes members of the public will see through the smoke that has been created. If nothing else, has the EFF not created sort of a haziness around his perceived integrity?
Well, we've got with the EFF a very interesting thing. If you compare South Africa with what's happening in the United States of America and the whole story of fake news, creating an alternative narrative, creating an alternative story, I think that's what they're busy with. And I think South Africans need to push back, generally. The media needs to push back. The question I have as an analyst is, here we've got a political party with 6% support in Parliament. They had an 8% support during local government elections, but they enjoy a media attention far beyond the proportion of support they actually experience in the country as a whole. And I think journalists ought to do a better job on reflecting about what is a good story, what is a real story, and what is it that they should do and shouldn't do. And I think this last 2 weeks brought that issue very, very close to everybody.
I want to talk about the media if we get a chance, but you said the EFF was having a rough time. Others would say that they're doing what they need to do to speak to their constituency, the people who are angry and who are listening when they talk in terms of race.
Yes, they do. But I mean, the media is also there not only to show what's happening, but also to interpret and to reflect on what the bigger story is. And the issue is, there is more than one story. We live in very ambivalent times, and I think it is not very useful to provide only the story of the political groups like Black First, Land First, like the EFF and several others, that actually knows how to play the media, that does the things that attracts the media, so to speak. I think there's also another story. There's a good story to be told all over the place. There is the whole unpacking of state capture on the Zondo level. I know that receives a lot of attention, but that may even receive more attention, and that is part of the story beyond the guys dancing and toy-toying in front of the Zondo Commission.
How do you ignore the EFF, though? Let's just look at what Malema had to say. He said, don't be surprised because there could be a war, there will be casualties. He said Gordhan would fight back. He even said there could be a loss of life. Very provocative statement. So you say that kind of appeals to the cameras and gets us all there.
Yeah, well, I think that what he did there was to preempt a reaction expected from Pravin Gordhan by saying he will push back, and then there will be violence, and then there will have to be some form of reaction to it. That is anticipatory kind of action, which is not the case in terms of what Pravin Gordhan has done over the last decade being in government. It is not his style. So what I don't like to use the word fascism, but if you look at the methods used by fascists between the two world wars, they do two things. They hyper-focused on an issue, such as race or whatever it is that they're focusing on. And secondly, what they then do, they then put it into a military kind of context, a very organized way. And if you look at the EFF, I think we have to rewrite the handbooks. We're seeing here political action that I don't think South Africa can afford.
Yeah. All right, so we're running out of time, so we have to move what happened to what happened inside the Zondo Commission today. Did you find it very interesting the way Mzwanele Manyi was justifying how millions were spent in advertising in Gupta-linked newspapers and much less to sort of very well-established media houses?
When he spoke, I was reminded of an old English metaphor that says, "The lady doth protest too much." The way in which he explained and even played in on what the judge had to say about the media that he represented then. And I think Jimmy Manyi is a very specific kind of character in this country, and I think he is one of the guys that does the alternative story, the alternative truth. And I think the bulk of evidence shows in a different direction than what he today did in front of the Commission.
Do you think the Zondo Commission wasn't buying it?
Well, it's difficult to say, but what the Zondo Commission will do is to compare all the different kinds of stories, and then this outline or this outlier will obviously be shown. Remember, the Zondo Commission isn't going to do anything other but that to advise the President on what they've found, and this may go on for a long time still to come. And I think his story will be one of those that I think will just be shown not to be the normal story. This is his own interpretation of what went on. The bad stuff is that both ANN7 and New Age already collapsed, and everything with that. And I think the state capture process is so well established now in the country's unfolding that I think it's very difficult for him to sustain his story.
The final topic, the ex-SARS boss, Tom Moyane, went to the Constitutional Court. He was not granted access to the highest court in the land. He wants to oppose his firing by the President. I said this may be the end of the options, but there are some alternatives in lower courts. Where do you think this case is right now?
Yeah, it was a very interesting strategy to approach the highest court, and I don't think ever it was regarded as a very successful strategy. Now they have to go down to lower courts. Maybe they get a better hearing there and then appeal again. So I don't think their story is over. But remember, the longer Moyane takes on arguing his case, the cost goes up, and it's more difficult. One of these days, he will be out. Well, he's already fired in that sense, and I think his story is also going to run out. What he shows, and several other people, is that the pushback against change is very real, very hard, and well funded.
Well, the Zondo Commission is going to be releasing its final report, handing that to the President. Just give us a brief overview of how important was it for South Africa? What do you expect?
Yeah, I think the Zondo Commission was very important. And remember, that is one of the things which Malusi Gigaba did when he was Minister of Finance, to introduce the Zondo Commission, which was then eventually supported and issued by the President, the normal way South African commissions work. I think they will find that in the time that Moyane was in charge of SARS, SARS failed the country in terms of its necessity to earn income for and to finance the budget. And I think the fact that they provided an interim report, which the President based decisions on, I think it will just be completing that report, showing how things actually went wrong at SARS and what the solutions are to correct those issues that went wrong since 2014.
All right, thank you very much, political analyst from Northwest University, Theo Venter.